if the US attacks Iran, can Iran stand up to the might of the US military? Also, apart from attacking US bases in West Asia region, does Iran possess the military might to choke Hormuz? Rushabh Tare says, could we talk about Iran? While the people are protesting, there seems to be no leadership inside Iran. Really? Okay. The IRGC, despite being compromised, has conducted brutal crackdowns. Really? Because the Western media is reporting that? Is that so? Is that why you're saying that? The Iranians blocked Starlink with the help of Russia. If the US and Israel go there, Khamenei will make it a patriotic war and the mission fails. Also, Iran is not a rollover. They are pretty capable and may inflict damage and fight a war of attrition, which Trump can't afford. Trump can't afford to get bogged down in Iran. At most, they may bomb Tehran and nuclear facilities. So what is going to be the end game in Iran? Will it be a brutal crackdown, civil war, or any other hidden moves, or are we underrating them? Okay, first of all, there seems to be no leadership inside Iran. I'm not sure what's the basis for that kind of statement or claim. There is clear leadership within Iran. The government is functioning. The nation is being governed, administered. Right? There is leadership, clear leadership. The IRGC, despite being compromised, has conducted brutal crackdowns. How do we know they have conducted brutal crackdowns? Because the Western media is reporting that. On what basis is the Western media putting out whatever numbers, 12,000 dead? On what basis? Do they have reporters on the ground who can actually corroborate those numbers? They don't. So from where do these numbers of 12,000 dead come? There are some videos on social media of some protests happening over a period of maybe a week or so in large cities like Tehran and Mashhad, perhaps, etc. That's a couple of cities, maybe 4 or 5 large cities. What about the rest of Persia? What about that? All the hundreds of towns, villages, thousands of villages. What about that? What about the other provinces? What's happening there? Nothing's happening there, as far as we can know or see. So a few cities, there are demonstrations happening over a period of, let's say, 5 to 7 days or whatever the period of time is. That doesn't mean that Iran is under chaos. Now, brutal crackdowns. How do we know the IRGC has been doing all this? We can see some videos on social media of some men firing rifles or weapons at a crowd. The men aren't wearing uniforms. They could be IRGC in plain clothes. They could be maybe agents of some foreign country in plain clothes. How do we know who they are? I mean, whatever claims we make, there has to be clear evidence for the claim. We can't just assume it's this or that. So, I have no evidence the IRGC has conducted brutal crackdowns. I have seen some sad, terrible, tragic images of dead people, but it's not 12,000. And I don't know who killed them, whether it's the IRGC or whether it is foreign agents. I don't know who killed them. So how do you know who killed them? Because the BBC is saying it. Do you trust the BBC? Have you seen BBC's reporting towards India? All lies. Have you seen the CNN's reporting towards India, about India? If you look at the BBC and the CNN and all the Western media outlets, the overwhelming majority of its reporting about India is negative. It's consistently negative. Much of it is just lies. So how can you trust that media? I just don't get it. I don't get why Indians don't think. Okay, and there is the thing about Starlink. Well, it looks like the Iranians are successfully, at least partially successfully, blocking Starlink, perhaps with Russia's aid, possibly. Okay. Now, the question is, if the US attacks Iran, can Iran stand up to the might of the US military? And can they choke? Can they blockade the Strait of Hormuz? Can they attack American bases in West Asia, etc.? So let's take a look at the US bases in West Asia. Okay. US bases in Middle East. Okay, they call it Middle East, we call it West Asia, whatever. Here we have it. So as you can see, how about this? This is cleaner. US military facilities in the Middle East. Let me open this in a different. Let me reopen that properly. Okay, so here's a bunch of American military facilities in West Asia. You have bases in Oman, you have bases in UAE, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait. Iraq obviously is essentially under US occupation. In Jordan, Syria is also a US asset now. Turkey also. Israel is obviously the US number one supporter, ally. And of course, Pakistan is now, you could say, a US asset. So Iran is kind of encircled from three directions, right? That's where we have it. Now, what that means is that if there's a war, if there's a US or US Israeli joint invasion uh, of Iran, or or an attack on Iran, then what you will have is that Iran will be in a position to strike at all these American assets, whether it's Oman, whether it's UAE, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Iraq, Syria, Jordan, Turkey, wherever. The Iranians can strike at these American assets, uh, because the Iranians have very high quality missiles in very large quantities. Quality plus quantity, both, right? The Iranians could hit Israel. They could hit all these American air bases around them. They could hit Pakistan if required. They could even hit Turkey if required with their ballistic and cruise missiles and so on. They also have high quality drones, the Iranians. So they could use the drones and missiles to also blockade the Strait of Hormuz. They also have a decentish navy. But the real strength is the missiles that Iran has. So Iran could be pretty capable at doing this. Yeah. And if the US and Israel attempt an invasion of Iran, that they'll get bogged down potentially. Because look, I don't know how many Iranians actually are opponents of the regime of the Ayatollahs. I don't know. The Iranian diaspora in the West, it is overwhelmingly anti the Iranian regime. They are against the Iranian regime, most of them. But they don't represent the true voices of the people who live in Iran, right? The Iranian diaspora outside Iran. So it's highly possible that maybe even today, maybe 55% of Iranians support the regime, maybe 65% support the regime. And what you see is just in a couple of cities. And if Iran comes under foreign invasion, okay, and US style invasions always cause large numbers of civilian casualties. Look at the way the Americans have done in the things in the past. They essentially flattened Iraq in 2003, flattened entire cities. Obviously, cities have people inside. We don't talk about them, right? When the Americans invade the flattened cities, this causes tremendous numbers of casualties. The Americans say it's okay, it's part of the game. If Iranians are killed in this manner, do you think even the ones who are against the regime, you don't think they'll fight back? Iran's a pretty big country. So Iran can inflict damage. Iran can fight. Of course, pinpoint strikes, it's something the Americans are very capable of. They can take out nuclear facilities, military facilities. I'm sure if the Americans quickly take out the missile facilities, then Iran could be kind of a sitting duck. But the people will fight, potentially. Right? So then overall, with this understood, what's the end game in Iran? That is the big question. What is America's end game in Iran? What the Americans seek is, first of all, a complete end to Iran's nuclear program. Complete end of the program. And secondly, the Americans seek control of Iran's oil and gas resources. They seek control over that. Two things only. The regime change may not even be that important, as long as the Americans are convinced that Iran's nuclear program is finished, and two, the Americans can control all of Iran's resources of oil and gas, then the Americans are fine. So if the regime of the Ayatollahs can provide evidence to the US that they have completely ended the nuclear program, and they hand over control of oil and gas to the Americans, then the Americans will be very pleased, and that is the end game, essentially. So whatever the US is doing globally, it's about control of land and oil resources, energy resources. That's what it is. And I don't think it's going to be very easy for the Americans to effect a regime change in Iran. It's going to be difficult. It's going to be chaotic if they try it. So that's the situation. So the end game, once again, to reiterate, the Americans seek to control energy and territory and resources, other natural resources, critical minerals and whatnot. That's what they see. They don't care about the people of Iran or whatever. And if you are under the impression that if there is a regime change in Iran, then Iran will become a Zoroastrian nation. Think again. If the Americans actually succeed in effecting a regime change in Iran, they will flood Iran with Christian missionaries. It's the first thing they'll do. Remember that. If Iran falls to the US, Iran is not going to become a Zoroastrian nation, it's going to become a Christian nation.